Yeah. Hello and welcome back. Live on stage, we have Justus, and you're going to tell us something about task runners. And I think we should start by giving you a big round of applause. The stage is yours.
Hey, thank you very much. And hello for you all. So, did you like the coffee and cake that was offered? Yes, great. Uh, I I was so nervous that I couldn't eat, but sort of like this is a really nice thing to be in front of you all. As I said, I'm talking about running tasks in a development project. But first, as we start, I'm Justus Hämäläinen, and I work as a. It's hard to say because sort of like one problem with my sort of way that I do my work is I I don't like to choose only a one job. I like to work in different kind of situations, in different kind of projects, with sort of like business side, with the tech side, sort of talking about the what we should do next, and then next moment talking about should we run things with bash scripts or like how we should manage sort of like details. Currently, I'm working. I have a small team, and we work with a few projects. One is Vegemi. Vegemi is a food education software that tries to help families and kids to eat more fruits and veggies. It tries to make it more fun. It tries to make people to understand better what are the benefits of eating sort of fruits and veggies. Then the second thing is I'm part of is Franklin that does electrical construction and home like building automation. You can already see the synergies between those two projects. And then the third thing that my team is working on is we work with a pool real estate agency that sort of helps people to find homes. And one thing that combines all of those projects is that they use Django, and that's why sort of like I'm here talking about something. And I'm talking about Manage.py, and basically what it does, it already sort of like does all maintenance tasks that you have in your uh, Django projects, and we already saw a lot of sort of commands that you use when you are interacting with models and schemas and creating sort of migrations for your database. And for a brief background, sort of like how I ended up being interested in Manage.py, which I do think everybody understands why it's so interesting piece of the whole Django project. But I have always sort of like thought about ways how to make code bases easy to understand and easy to use. And because one of those things that I have noticed in many projects that you have a README that is pretty long, that sort of like has all of the steps that you need to be able to run the process that you are. How many you have a sort of README in your project that you are working on now that sort of tells how to set up the system? And how many READMEs are up to date? You are like how many of you are 100% certain that if I would take that README, I get the project running? Yeah. And this was one of those things that sort of like I noticed that they are not up to date. And then the other problem that I don't like to read. Like I'm sort of hired to write code, not to read paragraphs. So sort of like how could you make things easier? And I came up with sort of like there's 3 commands that if you have, it makes a lot easier to sort of start interacting with a new project. First is start script, and basically if you have a script that will set up everything or at least tell that you haven't installed some dependencies that is needed for the project, it will fail and tell that to you. So you have a one sort of like base and it documents what you need to do to be able to run your project. Then test script, and it basically runs all of those things that can fail. So there's one command that you can run after your changes and know does the sort of continuous integration fail. And then the final one is deploy. And the reason is that there's often things that sort of like are hard or not totally working or needs changes related to deployment process, and really often nobody sort of like wants to work on that part of the application stack. And I have maybe sort of like I have a this kind of like traumas of being that person that ends up working on the deployment process, and with all of the easy to use cloud tools and CI tools, and sort of like being a little bit of afraid of them. Well, that's a sort of like thing that, let's say 10 years I've sort of like wanted to get these scripts like working, but the real problem is that when you are doing a sort of script that you want to work straight out of the sort of box, you'll end up using the lowest common denominator. And basically it means the pawn shell, and I don't mean bash, I mean the sort of like pawn shell. And for example, I personally use a corn shell in my development environment. So you end up in a situation that you don't have a language that is really nice and easy to use. Then you end up in a situation that you have some tools that you can use, but then, for example, if people are using Linux, there might be a curl or widget installed by default, and then, well, you need a Git. And did you all know that sort of like even if you have a program that is named the same, but the GNU Linux people didn't want to use the real Unix flags, so you have this kind of like a big problem with sort of like getting everything work. And then you end up installing custom software, and you basically are sort of writing a README to be able to sort of get the start script running that sort of was point to make the README less important. And even if you get this working, then there's somebody that comes to your project and starts using Windows, and then sort of like everything breaks. Yeah. So it's sort of like, but the thing is, I would like to have a widely supported general purpose language that would have a large user base, and it would be already available that you wouldn't have to install anything. And this is me understanding that we are working in a Django project, so we have a Python already installed. And well, this is, I'll show you a picture of our next development meeting where I sort of told my idea what we want to do. So it's me telling to other developers that, hey, it's really good idea that we'll start using Manage.py for everything. So rather than calling Manage.py from other like programs, we'll call other programs from Manage.py. And why to choose Manage.py? Why not to use some other task runner or some other sort of thing? The main thing is that when we are working in a Django project, we already are using it. We'll have to run migrations, or like run server or test. All of those are the things that we are already running. So why wouldn't we sort of like go all the way there? And next, let's check like how the Manage.py works. So how many of you know how many ways you can call Django management commands? There's somebody sort of like has 3 fingers up. That's good. So we have Django admin, we have the Manage.py, and we have the Python module Django. And the thing is, all of them are the same thing, essentially. So sort of like all of them, they work the same way. You'll call it, you give them a command name, and then it sort of finds that command and runs it. But how the commands, like where they are, how the sort of like, it tells that what to run when you call migrate or run server. Well, every command is built the same way. And this is the sort of great way of with Django. There is no sort of special cases within the Django environment. You have basically app name, Then you have management and command directories, and within those directories you have a command name.py, which sort of like means that for start project you have a core management commands start.py. For run server, core management commands run server .py. For collect static contribute static files management commands collect static.py. You'll start to see a pattern here. So that's the way that Django knows the applications. But well, then there's a question that how it like knows where to look those. The core is easy because they are always available, but how all of the other stuff is found? And how many sort of like the great thing for me with Django is that basically everything comes back to the installed apps. Like almost everything sort of like the great thing with Django is that it works the same way whatever you are doing. And this is a good example of, about it. So same way than static files. Based on the order you have in your installed apps, it chooses which static files based on the path it will load. You can then override existing static files, you can override existing templates, you can override existing commands, you can create new commands. And let's check now like what is the minimum like thing that you need to do to be able to have a new command in Django. So to create a new command, we'll first need to create an app. Let's call it hello C. It would be hello command, but I don't have enough horizontal space with the font size I'm using, so we'll have to use short names for the then in the settings files, we'll add the hello command app. And this is something that if you have a problem, basically always for me, it's the thing that I didn't take the time to put things in the installed apps. And if you check the hello C directory, we have management, commands, and hello command.py. Then of course normal app files like apps.py, models.py. Then within the hello command.py, we'll import from the Django core management base command. Then we create a class that is named command. It's important it's named command. That is the way that sort of Django finds the right thing to run. Help, it's used to sort of like tell the users what the command should do. Then we'll just override handle method. And that's all. Like those, basically like 4 lines of code, and then we can do anything that we want within a Python. So it's pretty easy from my point of view. And then after you have done all of this, you can run the command Python managed by hello command, and it will answer. Simple, easy. And it's not all. The best thing is that sort of as with Django, somebody's already sort of worked on this, had a real problems and need to extend things. So it's really too easy to add, for example, flags or sort of options to your command. So you'll just override add arguments method, where you get self and parser. The parser is instance of argparser. That is a sort of like Python module for passing command line arguments. And with that you can just add, for example, parser add argument a name option. And then action store tells that we'll want to keep the value that you are providing, and help just this thing that you want to show the user when they ask for the help. And now what you get, you still have handle, and in the keywords you will get the variable, the option that you have set in the name that you set on the add argument. And then you can do what you want with those arguments. And again, when you run the command and you pass that argument, it will sort of like work. So it's really easy to add those things to those to start creating command line tools with Manage.py. And then the extending part. So sort of like you can create new commands, that is great, but you can also change, break, and sort of totally modify what the sort of existing commands do. Like there was an idea here that you can add a sort of validator that your pizzas don't have pineapple, but sort of you could create a make migrations tool that sort of just removes that information there. It doesn't sort of like take, doesn't allow pineapples to be removed. Yeah. But let's see how to integrate a tailwind to the run server process. So again, we'll create a new app, detail, and again, short name because we have only so much horizontal space. We add the detail to the settings app, and then we'll create the command. So now, as you notice, detail management commands run server. And because we have the detail as a first thing, then the Django knows that when we call the run server command, it calls our run server, not the core version. When we are extending, we need to do things a little bit differently. So we'll import from Django core management commands run server, so the command that we want to extend. And we need to import, because Django works in a way that it loads the file and it runs the class named command. And if we want to have a command in our file, we need to have our class named command. So we need to rename it. And one good way of the renaming is to say that sort of like base run server command, because then you know what the command is that you are extending. You create class command, and here you do override run argument. Do people notice what we are doing differently compared on the last example? Does anybody want to yell? Yeah. And we are overriding run, not handle. But this is sort of like, I didn't point that out to you so much on that. Now the question, why are we overriding run here, not handle? Well, if we go to the core server.py file and check how it does things, each handle command does things related to restarting the app when you change a file, and then it calls self-run that really does the sort of like starting of the server itself, and then there's cleanup stuff. So because the sort of command class is just a normal Python object or normal Python class, you sort of like can look at it and you can extend different parts of it, so that you can sort of like piggyback on the things that it's already doing. So basically we'll extend the run if we want to extend the run server command, and again we can do anything we want before we call the super run. So we can sort of like, well, we have unlimited possibilities. We can sort of like, you can break things really horribly, or sort of you can do nice sort of like really hard to catch bugs if you sort of like try to do too complex things. But now we have power of doing anything. So let's continue of integrating Tailwind. Again, we have the directory, we have a management command run servers, then we have a source that is our input CSS if we want to add Tailwind related directives. Then we have static detail main CSS. This is our output where we output the Tailwind CSS. Normal files, then of course packagization. Tailwind is a npm sort of package, so you need to install the dependencies and then you need to add Tailwind config. And with Tailwind config, one of those things that because the directory that we are running it's the detail directory, we'll go one directory back and then just search all of the templates, static files, and we generate the CSS that we want for all of our thing. And now will do so this is the class, command class, and what we need to do to be able to run this kind of like a background running service. So we'll need to get a process ID so that it's not garbage collected before our code exits. So in the run, we first want to have the command directory. That means the command directory is the detail management commands directory, and from that we'll want to go to the app directory itself, so that we'll run things in right places. And then whatever sort of process we want to call, we'll use subprocess popen, so we open a pipe. And here we can example call the tailwind to sort of watch and build our sort of CSS at the same time we are running the run server. And here is the sort of, we want to set the current working directory to the app directory so that it finds all of the files, shell, so it sort of like works and everything exists what many sort of like terminal applications expect. Standard in would be in like sub process pipe. Then there's standard out and standard error. So we'll just direct everything that happens to our application, so we'll know what is happening there. And then we'll call super command self-run. And this way we can call, here is an example of Tailwind, but we could call any application we want. So this is sort of like, now we are using the Python Manage.py as a shell, so that it calls any application or any program that we can think of. And I'll show an example of calling async libraries, because after that you have the information of doing basically anything in Manage.py side. So if we would have async example command, we would have some async sort of like API calls or something that we want to do. We'll wait all of those calls to be ready. Then we have the normal command, and then we'll just in the handle use the async run to run those things. So we'll move to async side if we need to, and back to the sort of like sync side after it's done. And it's okay because all of the management commands are something that we run that start and end. They are sort of like synchronous by nature. And the great thing is, when you start doing that, is that it's just Python. So you sort of like, anything that you can think of, you can now do as part of your sort of like process. You can use any package. So if you want, you can take pandas, you can start creating sort of like processes that take your data, generate some kind of like information about it. You can call any program, you can call Git, you can call anything that you want and manage those things through the Python side. It handles a lot of those things that are sort of like cross operating system, cross platform things, and makes everything really easy in that way. You have access to the settings by, so you don't need to manage environment variables. You could sort of like set things in your settings file and read that file, and now everything is committed to Git and it's within the Python, not so that it's in some script and you just need to know that there's an environment variable that needs to be set. And now sort of like after giving all of this power to you, like what you should do with it. And I have few ideas. So for example, npm install. Tailwind is one of those tools that I like to use, but one of those things that it's a sort of node program, so you sort of like have to handle different things. But you can create a script that sort of handles all of that setting up of the installing all the dependencies, running it, being part of the run server command, being part of the collect static command. All of that you can do yourself. You could have a more complex sort of like build process for your front end. And it also would be something that when you start run server, it would automatically run. And it helps, again, people that are not so maybe sort of like in the front end side, that you can set up things without having to move between two different worlds. You could have dev fixtures so that you have a command that would go take an SSH connection to your dev servers, would pull the media files from there, would pull the database that you have running there, and now you have the sort of like environment set up with data that is sort of like sane, or at least more sane, that you can sort of start learning about the application. Managing secrets, so you could use any, but one example, one password software development kit. You can use anything that you sort of like need, but you can start integrating more stuff within your application, not so that it's sort of like integrated, for example, in the CI side. You don't need to use GitHub Actions, sort of these kind of like packages. You could use Python Slack SDK. You can generate a sort of send message command that sends a Slack message if you are using ChatOps. And now you have something that is in the Python side. It's easier to debug because you can run it on your own machine. You don't need to sort of like go back and forth with the GitHub Actions, sending a comment that I changed something, that will it work. As it's Django, you have batteries included, and it means that sort of you can get easily colored text. There are roles that you can sort of like use to set different colors, and then there's themes, so sort of like you don't have to say that success is always green with the black background. It handles those okay. And then also the no color situation, because there are situations where you don't have colors. Automatic batch completion, and of course call command, so that when you do something as a command, you can easily use it also in the Django code. So if you have some processing that you want to trigger within the sort of managing a request, you can easily sort of do that. And I'll tell you one case where we use it. It's part of how we handle certificates. So we have a GitHub action that is basically just a time trigger, and it calls Manage.py manage certificates. It pulls certificates from one password. If they are still valid, it doesn't do anything. But if there's less than 1 week validity on them, it generates new certificates with DNS challenge and saves them to one password. And now our deploy process can read them from the one password and set up on the servers working okay. And this was important for us because in the Franklin side, we deploy on places like local networks where we don't have access and we cannot do a HTTP challenge, but we still want to know, still want to access our sort of like internal services through an HTTPS without managing the whole sort of like self-signed certificate process. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Justus. Do we have a question or two or three? We can certainly manage a question. Yes?
There.
Question there in the back.
Hello, thank you for your interesting talk. You've certainly made some very compelling arguments, I think, for using Manage.py. However, do you think there are any cases where it's not advisable to use it?
I do. I can come up with sort of like arguments against it, and I have heard a lot of arguments against it. But I'll have to say that right now, and this might be a sort of like that changes after some time. But right now, I feel that that's one of the best. If like again, we are working so that we'll commit fully on Django, so we'll use sort of not the best parts, but the whole Django thing. So I think for our cases, it's been a really good situation that we'll do everything within that, because it comes to those like secret management and environment variable management that becomes a lot easier to understand and sort of like map how things are used. So not really sort of like if you are not sort of committing totally to Django, then it sort of like might not be that good idea. But those cases where you are going to commit, it's really good idea. At least now, I feel like right now. So I'll after 2 years I'll come to here with a talk that you don't want to do everything in Manage.py.
Great. More questions? I'd like to ask maybe about what kind of effect it has had on your readmes compared to some before situation.
Well, it hasn't really affected readmes of projects that I'm running, but it has changed things so that people that are not me can also sort of contribute. So they are now sort of like at least code that documents what needs to be done to get things running. So it's
All right. So we are going to switch directly to the next talk. So hang around, but let's give Justus a big round of applause. Thank you so much for the amazing
Thank
talk.
you.
Thank you.